pediatricians were baffled. Victoria grew distant. Charles grew observant. He began watching Naomi differently, not as staff, but as a puzzle. Why her? Why did his son respond to her voice, her touch, her presence? Weeks passed, and whispers began spreading among the staff. Victoria avoided the nursery when Naomi was there. The tabloids ran stories about the mysteriously reclusive Langston heir. Investors began asking subtle questions about Charles's distraction from business meetings. And then came the twist no one expected. One evening, as Naomi rocked the now smiling baby in the nursery, Charles entered quietly holding a file. His face was pale. "Naomi," he said carefully, "how long have you been in California?" She looked up, confused. 3 years, sir." His hands trembled slightly. "And before that?" "Atlanta." He opened the file. Inside were hospital records, DNA results, a private investigator's report he had ordered in secret after noticing the uncanny resemblance between Naomi and his son. The same almond-shaped eyes, the same dimple in the left cheek, the same rare blood type that puzzled doctors. Charles's voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell me?" Naomi went still, completely still. The hum stopped. "Tell you what, sir." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "That you donated eggs at the Atlanta fertility clinic 7 years ago." The room seemed to tilt. Victoria, standing unseen outside the half-open nursery door, felt her knees weaken. Naomi's face drained of color. She had signed papers, anonymous donation, compensation for her mother's chemotherapy. She never imagined, never, that her biological child would end up in the home where she scrubbed floors. "I didn't know," she whispered. Charles's eyes shone with a storm of realization. "The clinic matched us. Your genetic profile. It's you. He's biologically yours." The truth detonated silently between them. The baby stirred, sensing tension. Outside the door, Victoria's world collapsed. The child she had fought to carry, to birth, to claim as her triumph over gossip, was genetically tied to the woman she barely acknowledged. The poor black maid she had treated as invisible was, by blood, the child's mother. What followed was not shouting. It was colder than that. Lawyers, contracts, accusations. Victoria spiraled into paranoia, convinced Naomi had planned it. The media somehow caught wind of internal turmoil at the Langston estate. Protesters gathered outside, debating surrogacy ethics and racial inequality. Charles found himself torn between legal reality and emotional truth. Because every time the baby cried, it was Naomi who calmed him. Every time. Victoria demanded Naomi be fired. Charles hesitated. Firing her meant severing the only bond that soothed his son. Keeping her meant confronting a societal scandal that could fracture his marriage and empire. But the greatest twist was yet to come. Naomi, heart aching, made the ultimate decision before anyone could force her hand. She resigned, quietly. No lawsuit, no demands. She packed her belongings and left the mansion before dawn, leaving behind only a handwritten letter in the nursery. In it, she wrote that motherhood is more than DNA. It is sacrifice, and sometimes love means stepping away so a child can grow without confusion or conflict. She thanked Victoria for carrying him. She thanked Charles for giving him opportunity. And she asked only one thing, that they teach him compassion. When the baby woke that morning and began crying inconsolably for the first time in weeks, Victoria broke, truly broke. She read the letter again and again, tears soaking the ink. In that raw moment, stripped of pride, she understood something she never had before. Naomi hadn't taken anything from her. She had given everything. Days later, in a move that shocked the world, Victoria held a press conference, not to deny rumors, but to tell the truth. She spoke about privilege, about the unseen women who make luxury possible, about the biological mother who saved her child's life with a hymn. And then she announced the creation of the Carter Foundation, named after Naomi, dedicated to funding healthcare for low-income women seeking fertility treatments without exploitation. The internet exploded. Some praised her, some criticized. But across the country, millions watched a wealthy white socialite publicly acknowledge the strength of a poor black woman who had every reason to claim more than she did. Months later, in a small church in Georgia, Naomi sat quietly in the back pew as a familiar melody filled the air. She had returned home, working at a local clinic, rebuilding her life away from cameras. Her phone buzzed. A video message. It was Victoria. In the clip, baby Langston, now giggling, reached toward the camera as Victoria hummed the same gospel hymn, imperfectly but earnestly. "He still remembers," Victoria said softly. "And so do I." Naomi closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. Not of loss, but of peace. Because sometimes the unthinkable act isn't picking up a billionaire's baby. Sometimes it's choosing grace when the world expects revenge. And that is how a crying child in a Malibu mansion exposed truths about race, motherhood, and humanity that money could never silence. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that dignity doesn't depend on wealth and love, doesn't depend on status, subscribe now, because the next story might just change the way you see the world. If you've ever doubted that a single moment can shatter everything you think you know about power, race, and love in America, then listen closely. Because tonight's story isn't just about a crying baby in a mansion. It's about secrets buried under silk sheets, about a woman the world refused to see, and about a truth so explosive it nearly destroyed one of the richest families in the country. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because stories like this, stories that hit you in the chest and refuse to let go, are exactly why this channel exists. Now imagine a mansion on the cliffs of Malibu, glass walls facing the Pacific, a nursery bigger than most apartments in New York, and a newborn baby boy who would not stop crying. For 3 nights straight, the child's screams echoed through Italian marble halls and beneath crystal chandeliers that cost more than most families earn in a decade. Doctors had been flown in from Boston and Chicago. Pediatric specialists with Ivy League degrees whispered terms like colic and acid reflux. Nannies with perfect resumes took turns pacing the imported Persian rugs. Nothing worked. The baby screamed until his tiny face turned crimson, until his fists shook, until even the hardened security guards outside the estate exchanged nervous glances. In the master bedroom, Victoria Langston, former runway model, now wife of tech billionaire Charles Langston, sat pale and trembling, her designer silk robe hanging off one shoulder, mascara streaked beneath her eyes. She had waited years for this child. Years of fertility treatments, tabloids speculating about her failure, society women whispering behind diamond-studded hands. And now that she finally had him, he would not stop crying. Charles, who had built a billion-dollar cybersecurity empire before turning 40, found himself powerless before the sound of his own son's agony. He could buy companies, he could influence senators, he could move markets with a single tweet, but he could not silence the cries coming from the nursery. And then there was Naomi. Naomi Carter, 32 years old, daughter of a Baptist pastor from rural Georgia, had come to California chasing stability after her mother's medical bills swallowed their savings. She wore plain uniforms, kept her hair tied back neatly, and moved through the Langston mansion like a shadow, efficient, invisible, underestimated. The staff called her the quiet one. Victoria barely remembered her name. Charles knew only that she came highly recommended by the agency and that she worked hard without complaint. On the 4th night of the baby's relentless crying, tension fractured the household. Victoria locked herself in the bathroom sobbing. Charles barked at the pediatrician over speakerphone. The head nanny threatened to quit. The baby's cries rose higher, sharper, almost desperate. And Naomi, standing in the doorway of the nursery holding freshly warmed towels, felt something twist inside her chest. She had been watching, listening, not just to the baby, but to the silence underneath his cries. There was a rhythm to it, a pattern, a memory. Slowly, almost hesitantly, she stepped forward. "Sir," she said softly. Charles turned, irritation flashing in his exhausted eyes. "What?" he snapped. Naomi swallowed. "May I try something?" The room went still. The nanny scoffed. Victoria emerged from the hallway, eyes red. "We've tried everything," she whispered bitterly. "Everything." Naomi nodded respectfully. "Yes, ma'am, but not this." She walked to the bed where the baby lay thrashing against Egyptian cotton sheets. Without asking further permission, she did the unthinkable. She picked him up and held him against her chest, skin to skin, ignoring the gasp that escaped Victoria's lips. Then she began to hum, not a lullaby from Spotify, not a nursery rhyme from a children's app. She hummed an old gospel hymn, low and steady, the kind sung in small southern churches without instruments, where voices alone carry faith through suffering. The melody vibrated through her ribcage into the child's tiny body. The baby's screams faltered. The nanny froze. Charles stared. Naomi swayed gently, humming deeper, adding soft words under her breath. Within seconds, seconds that felt like a miracle, The baby's cries weakened into whimpers. His fists unclenched. His breathing slowed. And then, impossibly, he fell asleep against her heartbeat. The silence that followed was so profound, it felt holy. Victoria covered her mouth. Charles blinked rapidly, as if unwilling to believe what he'd just seen. Naomi stood there quietly, holding the billionaire's son like he was her own, humming the final line of the hymn before carefully laying him back down. He just needed to feel safe, she said gently. No one spoke for a long moment. Something had shifted in the air, something bigger than a crying baby. From that night on, the baby only slept when Naomi held him. If anyone else tried, the screams returned. Pediatricians were baffled. Victoria grew.